this third session here, Industry and Government. And the first speaker will be Chad Phipps, who's graciously flown in from Indiana. He is Senior Vice President and General Counsel and Corporate Secretary for Zimmer Incorporated in Indiana. He has global responsibility for Zimmer's legal affairs, and he serves as I mentioned, Secretary to the Board of Directors. Chad?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rosen. It's a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate the invitation. Had an opportunity to speak at the same hearing that Dr. Rosen did back in February, so it's nice to be here today. First of all, I want to say we are not the company responsible for Lipitor, Charité, or ProDisc, so I'm glad that I didn't see any Zimmer products up there in a negative light today. But this has been near and dear to my heart and my colleagues' heart at Zimmer here the last 9 months in particular, and I'll explain why. But really, we have been tackling this issue of conflicts of interest now daily and nightly often, so glad to come and speak to you about where we are in addressing this. But first I want to give you just a quick overview of who Zimmer is. Some of you may not be familiar with us, but really it's been in existence for about 80 years now. We're based in Warsaw, Indiana, which is the orthopedic capital of the world. 3 of the largest 4 orthopedic manufacturers in the world are based in that little town of Warsaw. We were originally a private company, and then in the 1970s were purchased by Bristol Myers Squibb. So for a long time, Zimmer was the orthopedic division for Bristol Myers. In 2001, Bristol Myers spun out Zimmer into its own public company, independent. We're traded on the New York Stock Exchange, so we've been an independent public company since 2001. Over 7,600 employees, and then a big independent sales force in the U.S. 2007 revenues were about $4 billion. We are the market share leader in both orthopedic implants of hips and knees. We also have a spine business that some of you may be familiar with in Minneapolis. We do trauma products, we do extremities implants, and also have a dental business just down the road here in Carlsbad, California, where we implant dental devices that are made. I want to talk about conflicts of interest again today. Just move forward too much. Conflicts of interest, as many of you know and others have talked about today, are just inherent in these relationships between industry and healthcare professionals, where you have in the same individual on one hand a customer or a potential customer that either purchases or refers the selection of our implants, and at the same time that person is also a vendor or a consultant oftentimes that we need to perform necessary services for our company. So you're always battling this inherent conflict of interest that we have to manage aggressively. And I want to talk to you a little bit about how we're doing that today with a new model. But Zimmer in the orthopedic industry came into great scrutiny in 2005. The U.S. Attorney's Office in New Jersey commenced an investigation of our industry, and it centers upon these very relationships where we're using surgeon consultants to perform services for us. That investigation played out over the course of nearly 2 years, and then on September 27th of 2007, all 5 companies at the same time entered into resolution agreements, and those take the form in the DOJ's criminal case of a deferred prosecution agreement. That's an 18-month obligation on our part. Federal monitors are assigned to the companies in this very onerous document to comply with for 18 months. At the same time, we wanted to make sure that we were wrapping up the investigation as to the full federal government, so we also settled with the Office of Inspector General of the Health and Human Services, and that takes the form of a corporate integrity agreement, which many of you are probably familiar with. There's been many of those executed, and that's a 5-year term that runs concurrent with that 18-month DPA. There's ongoing enforcement and scrutiny of the industry, not just orthopedic, but broadly medical device and healthcare companies around the globe. Certainly the DOJ, the OIG, The SEC is also very involved, and I will tell you the medical device industry is also under an informal investigation overseas for potential violations of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. And that's a situation where the very same issues are in play because most physicians in Europe, for example, are part of a government-owned hospital system, so those people become foreign officials. So they are covered by the act. So obviously these orthopedic companies, Medtronic and others, are under investigation by the SEC and the DOJ overseas as well. I will tell you, it just keeps coming, and the local countries in other regions of the world also are starting to be much more aggressive in enforcing their anti-corruption laws at the local level. Surgeons are going to jail, companies and individuals are getting in trouble. And someone mentioned earlier, but I would argue that almost daily I open my email or see a paper that somewhere this issue is being scrutinized around the globe. And I will also say it's an environment that I think is here to stay. This is not a deal where the government's going to be interested while these deferred prosecution agreements are in place for 18 months. This is the new scrutiny that this industry is going to be under for forever, frankly. And I think part of it is that, as we all know, there's a healthcare crisis in this country, and this is one piece that I think people are interrogating and dissecting pretty closely to see if anything that's happening in these relationships is improper and leading to a bigger healthcare problem in our country. So we're going to see Congress continue to get more involved. Mr. Mitchell, I think we'll talk more about that. Pharmaceutical industry, as many of you know, went through this back in the late 90s and early 2000s. A lot of the settlements came around there. I think TAP Pharmaceutical was one of the biggest. It was $875 million that they paid to the government. I will tell you, I think the pharmaceutical companies are kind of seeing a second wave of that. So just because you settle on these, it's not over. You're always subject to that same ongoing scrutiny and enforcement activity. And I also think hospitals and academic institutions such as yours are being much more active in getting involved in these. They're wanting to know what their physicians and people on their staffs are receiving from industry, and I applaud those institutions such as the UCLA that have taken measures on their own to address these issues, and I think that'll continue as well. I also want to emphasize, and it's important to many of you in this room, this is not just about the companies. I've heard that before in the last 9 months. This is very much a two-sided relationship. I've heard government speakers recently say it takes two to tango, or you have to address the supply side as well as the demand side. And it's the surgeons right now that are also under investigation. It's not as public. There's a lot of subpoenas, as I understand. I have no knowledge of that other than what I hear day to day. And I do know OIG and DOJ offices are looking at surgeons, and to the extent they find bad actors, they will bring justice to that side of these relationships as well. I want to move on. I also want to make sure that it's clear that we believe that industries and physicians are always going to have to collaborate. It's very critical and essential to advancing medical technology and making sure that we're improving patients' lives. You know, examples of that in orthopedics particularly are product development efforts where we're always looking to create innovative solutions to address unmet clinical needs. Training on the safe and effective use of our products, which is an FDA requirement. My father just had a hip replacement earlier this month, and I tell you, I wouldn't want to send my dad to a surgeon who hasn't been trained extensively. You know, this is not prescribing a pill. This is very invasive, critical procedures with high risk. I argue that the spine area is even more so than the hip and knee area, as you know. So we always need to make sure that surgeons are being trained on the safe and effective use of our products. So product development, surgeon training, you know, Zimmer's a great company. We have a lot of resources, but we cannot do those things alone. You don't want a bunch of engineers. We have great engineers, but they're not the ones to be able to say, you know, what are those unmet clinical needs? How can we advance care? We have to bring surgeons into that design and development process to make sure that we're getting their input. You know, instrumentation is another big issue for us. People in a PhD role in our company cannot tell you how do you make instruments that are going to be easiest for surgeons to use to make sure these procedures are being done safely and effectively. So we're always going to need that. We need surgeons who have OR experience in the clinic, clinicians every day to train other surgeons. That's something we need to make sure happens. We can't do that internally as well as we could, having people that know this stuff and live it daily do it. External research is another area that we don't have the in-house horsepower to be able to do that, so we have to rely upon academic institutions and others to help us come up with the right research. Clinical studies, whether it's to obtain product approval or to show that there are successful outcomes. We don't have access directly to clinical data, so we need surgeons and others to provide that. It helps with reimbursement, obviously, as well. You need to be able to show those outcomes to be able to get the reimbursement for these products, which is critical. I'm not going to address the next point. Obviously, product development is critical for us. You can read the 3 points there below that, but it's certainly something that we have to continue to emphasize. So what we're trying to do is protect these collaborative relationships against the scrutiny and the skepticism. I think, and I've said this before, but the criticism that the orthopedic industry and others have gone through is well justified in some cases. I think the government is well intended in what they've been doing, and we understand that. We reflected on that, and I think it is justified. I think there have been some excesses in the past in our industry, and I think that's what we're trying to do now to make sure that we don't continue to be under fire, because it's not a good place to live, I will tell you. And also, if we don't tackle these issues head on, all of that negative stuff just continues to overshadow what's really important to us. And we have a lot of employees throughout the world that come to work daily and want to go home knowing that they contributed to helping millions of patients live a better quality of life. And that's really what it's all about for us. But when you pick up the newspaper every day and see tons of coverage about the dirtiness of industry and things, that just demoralizes people. It takes away from the good and all that we've done in collaborating with surgeons to really change the lives of many, many people for the better, and a lot of us in the future, I'm sure, as well. So that's why we're doing what we're doing. But I will tell you this, the historical model, it needs change, and that's what Zimmer is stepping up and doing as a leader on these issues. And we have to try to maintain, or in many instances, regain the trust of a lot of key stakeholders, whether they're people in Washington, D.C., whether they're patients, employees, in our case as a public company, investors. So a lot of people are following this issue, and we need to make sure that we have their trust and confidence. I also want to say that conflicts of interest are not going to go away. That's unavoidable. There's going to be conflict. If we would do everything to eliminate conflict of interest, I argue that would be an awful thing for patients. Again, you'd have a lot of engineers trying to scratch their head and develop products and train surgeons on how to use this stuff effectively. That's not the answer. So this is not about trying to eliminate conflicts. It's about trying to mitigate and address them and manage them in an appropriate manner. So what have we been doing to come up with this change model? And our approach has really been, a whole bunch of us at our company at the senior level have really analyzed and interrogated all of the different areas that we traditionally have collaborated with healthcare professionals, and in many instances paid them for services. And we tried to carve out which ones of these are just non-essential. And a couple of examples I would give you, and we did this a few years ago, but we just made a simple decision to eliminate all forms of entertainment. We did that in 2005. I will tell you that, whether it's a Lakers game or an Angels-Dodgers game, whatever you guys prefer, I don't think that surgeons or anyone else make product selection because somebody took them to a ball game. But I can see how someone would view that as an outsider and say, that doesn't look right. That looks like you're trying to do something to gain their favor and keep them happy so that they'll be friendly to you at the time that they purchase or make selections for the purchase of implants. So that was a no-brainer for us. We got rid of entertainment. In this latest round of interrogation that we've done on our own system, we've also banned gifts. Again, this is donuts in the OR. Does a sales rep need to bring donuts to the OR? In Singapore, it's moon pies, apparently, or moon cakes. If that's the kind of stuff that we're wasting our time and effort on, that's just crazy. And we came to that realization. Those are non-essential things for what we're trying to do and what surgeons, I think, expect of us as a manufacturer and seller of these products. So Those are things that we just said, we're not going to waste our time with it anymore. I don't want to argue about donuts in the OR or pens in someone's pocket that say Zimmer. We're just not going to do that anymore. So our focus has really been on what are the areas that are essential to continuing to deliver quality health care, and how can we change things to make sure that we're not putting those in a situation where it can be subject to abuse. So we've focused on that, and you can see all these areas that I'll go through more in-depthly here in a minute. But we've come up with a model that we think is sustainable, and we're trying to prepare ourselves for 5, 10, 15 years from now. We don't want to go through this incrementally. We could probably do the bare minimum right now, comply with our resolution agreements with the government, get by, and then go back to a better way, but not go as far as we need to go. So in Zimmer's case, we don't want to be drugged by the earlobes through this another time or two in the future. So we're going to take the steps right now to go as far as we think this needs to go so that it's not going to be subject to scrutiny in our case for years and years to come. And this last point, I want to emphasize, a lot of these things we're changing. It's not because we think there's been legal violations. I don't think there's been legal violations in most instances. What I do want to say is that what we're trying to do is avoid even the appearance of impropriety. And that's a really important point I want you all to leave with is, we want to make sure that in trying to build this trust and confidence of people, that no one can look at an arrangement and say, oh, come on, you're really just doing that to try to make these people buy your product. So we're trying to avoid that appearance of impropriety in all that we do. We don't have the time to go through everything, but I've highlighted a lot of the things specifically that we're doing, and they really fall into kind of 5 categories of strategy for collaboration. And the first one is in the area of product development. So we're coming up with new engagement and compensation structures for how we pay people to help us develop and design the best implants. And I will also tell you, these are being structured so that what we're doing safeguards both sides of these relationships. So as we've communicated this to the surgeons and other healthcare professionals with which we collaborate, we have also made it clear to them that what we're doing protects them. When they have a relationship with Zimmer as a consultant, all this structure should insulate them to a degree from scrutiny. And we want to make sure that's clear to them. So one thing we've done in the area of product development is looked at all of our royalty-bearing agreements in the history that we have in place today. We have a very robust compliance program that we put in place in 2005. The U.S. Attorney's Office in New Jersey obviously studied that. We're very impressed by it and acknowledged that when they announced the settlement. But what we did not do in 2005 was bring all of those old, royalty-bearing agreements, some of which were the 1990s, some of which we inherited through acquisitions of other companies. We did not bring those into our current practices, policies, and procedures. So as we've gotten into this period and worked with our monitor, we've realized that that's an area that's kind of hanging out there. We have these old relationships. People in the company today, such as myself, have no idea how those relationships were formed. We want to make sure that no one had bad intent, that they put someone on a development project to try to make them happy with our company so that they would buy our products. We have no idea because we weren't the people that were around in the 1990s when those relationships first came into being. So, this involves 75% roughly of the payments that we make to healthcare professionals is in the form of royalties. So it's a big area of focus for us. And what we're going to do is buy out a lot of those old contracts. And there's a third party that we've engaged that is going to do a net present value of those contracts. We're going to give people full and fair value for their contributions, but for those that are old, we're going to try to buy those out and bring everything into conformance with what our current day practices are. So that's a big project. Another thing we're doing is looking at our future compensation structures. Our royalty is always the best way to compensate people for their time and IP, intellectual property contributions. In many cases, I think royalties are the best way to truly show what is fair market value. How does that product perform in the marketplace is probably the best indicator of what that's worth. So, but maybe there's ways to structure. Should you pay the same royalty if it's kind of a line extension as opposed to a very new game-changing technology? Maybe not. So we're looking at that, and we'll be coming out with a new model for how we compensate people in future development projects. We also want to make sure that the size of these teams is efficient And in the past, our industry, I think, has probably had design teams of surgeons that were just too large. And again, that could be questioned as to, can all those people equally contribute enough to earn what ultimately inures to their benefit in the form of millions of dollars in many cases? Again, that could be subject to scrutiny. So we're going to have smaller, leaner, more efficient design teams. And, you still have to bring in different philosophies of implant choice and things. You're going to have European philosophies, Asia-Pac philosophies, U.S. philosophies. So we'll still have a lot of diversity on those teams, but it may be 3, 4, or 5 surgeon developers, not 10 or more. So that's another area that we're looking at closely. The next area we've kind of tackled is marketing and our infrastructure. And what we're trying to do here is make sure that our structures are geared such that surgeons' product selection is based on the unique and differentiating features of our products and technologies and nothing else. And you see this firewall concept. That's something we've changed our internal organizational structure so that it's clear that these people are on the corporate side, like a legal person. These people are on the sales and marketing side, a commercial side. And we've bifurcated those responsibilities very clearly. We made that known to surgeons and others that work with us. And sales and marketing people don't have a need to collaborate with surgeons. And all of our system is based on a needs assessment that's determined in advance. If we need product development expertise, or the medical education folks need someone to help train other surgeons, or we need research done, sales and marketing aren't the ones driving that. That's people responsible on the corporate side of the firewall. So our sales and marketing people no longer have any responsibility or involvement in who's a consultant, what their contract looks like, when they're getting paid. They're just out of that. If they get asked a question by a surgeon, that sales and marketing person says, you need to call so-and-so back in Warsaw, Indiana. And it's a new concept, but I think it's important. I think a lot of these companies have been scrutinized a lot because sales and marketing people are very involved often with these consulting arrangements, and that just looks bad and smells bad, and there's no basis for it. Our sales and marketing people, I will tell you, are kind of energized and pumped up by the fact that they don't have to kind of deal with all that stuff anymore. All they have to do is go out and sell our products, benefits, and features against X competitor, and that's fun for them. That's sales 101. My stuff in my sales bag is better than the stuff in her sales bag, so we're doing that. We are, as I said already, prohibiting educational practice-related and branded company gifts. That's the pens and things that have come up today. Again, it just looks bad. It's not important, so why put yourself through it? We are prohibiting company-sponsored presentations at medical society events, and this is what we're trying to do to address white coat marketing. The old style, and I'm not saying these are necessarily wrong, it doesn't look great. They kind of have the rotating guys come on for 12-minute speeches at a conference where Zimmer's funding that and sponsoring that conference. It looks like the people that they may be up there just promoting or kind of acting as a salesman for our products. We're trying to take that perception away. So we're going to continue to contribute to those things in a different way that I'll mention in a minute. But the days of people being kind of paid by Zimmer for their time to stand up at a Zimmer-sponsored event and speak about our products, we're not going to do that anymore. But what's perfectly legitimate is for a surgeon who's had a great experience, or his patients have had a great experience with our products, for that surgeon to get up on his own initiative and say, Zimmer's product is better than the competitor, the benefits and features of it are this, the outcomes my patients have had are this. They can do that all day long, but Zimmer's not sponsoring that or paying for that surgeon to do it. That's just something he can do in an academic forum all that he wants to. The third area that we've focused on is surgeon training. And again, it's critical from an FDA perspective and otherwise that we make sure our products are being used, and also our procedures. We have a lot of minimally invasive techniques and things that we've developed with surgeons, that those are all being done the right way. So we've kind of taken control, to say it kind of simply, of how surgeons get trained, and Zimmer is involved in that. We've centralized it. It's very objective-based. We've designed all of our curriculum for these courses so that it's very measurable, and we can test that the outcomes. There's no longer like field-based things being led by training. It's all corporate run, whereas in the past, the surgeons owned a lot of the content, and it was their training material. Now it's Zimmer corporate controlled content. which I think is a good move. We also used to have a lot of these Zimmer Institute sites at an academic institution, hospital, or another type of hospital where on-site people are getting trained on Zimmer products. Again, we think that's could appear to people to be improper because there's obviously a lot of money exchanged. So you go to some big customer site of Zimmer and you see the Zimmer Institute Training Center. Again, that doesn't look good. So we canceled those arrangements. We have found regional kind of independent sites. There's one in Irvine, I'm not sure the name of it, but it's kind of one of these independent lab settings where we can run cadaver labs, but it has nothing to do with anyone who's a potential customer hospital that buys our products. So that's another way that we've taken control of that. The fourth area is charitable contributions and grants, and this one's probably gotten a lot of attention than some of these other areas because mostly some other companies have come out after our announcement in April and said they're moving in this way too. But we're creating third-party mechanisms to oversee all of our charitable giving, our support for general education funding, for example. So we're going to have one or more third parties. They're very independent from Zimmer. They're not, the boards of these entities don't have any surgeons who are referring product selection. And that's the way that we're going to continue to do what we think is very worthy, and that is for industry to support general education through fellowships, residency programs, continuing medical education. Someone mentioned it before, but there's not a lot of resources available if the industry players don't step up and help fund that. So we're going to do that, but we're not going to do it in a way that it's Zimmer weighing people's applications and saying, yeah, we want to give it to them. Because in a lot of cases, again, those are going to be customers or potential customers of ours. So by parking all that money into a third party and then we kind of are out of it, that third party will then receive a request for donations and grants, and they'll make an independent decision as to whether that's where Zimmer's funding should go. So we just think that's a better model. I will tell you it's been difficult to put that in place because a lot of the entities that are interested in doing that and know orthopedics are conflicted somewhat because people on their boards, are people that are active surgeons and have consulting arrangements. So they've all had to establish with us through proposals how they attempt to address that independence issue. So that's still ongoing. We're doing the same thing with our in-kind product donations, and we do a lot of charitable product donations for orthopedic mission work and things. And we think that's awesome that surgeons and others volunteer their time to go to indigent areas and put implants in people that couldn't otherwise get access. That's awesome. So we want to contribute our products to that. But again, we don't want it to be us with any particular doctor or hospital. It goes through an independent third party. We announced a couple of weeks ago that we've arranged with a group called AmeriCares that can do that for us globally. So we gave our first donation was $1 million of product, and we'll continue to do that. We are going to, I talked about not giving gifts, but we are going to support education-related items. And again, these are things like textbooks, anatomical models, things like that. The industry traditionally has been the ones to help make sure those are available to people. We're going to do that again through the third party. We'll give the money to the third party. They'll buy the textbooks and anatomical models and other materials like that and get them into the hands of people that need them. But all of this is designed, again, so that Zimmer, at the end of the day, has absolutely no influence or say over who benefits from our grants and other contributions. So that's another model that, again, I think makes good sense in this climate now that we've analyzed it very closely. The last point I want to get to is, our settlement agreement with the government was based on activities within our U.S. hip and knee business, our core franchise. One solution would be, okay, so you do all this stuff for your U.S. hip and knee business, but is that really the right way to approach it? We said no. We have a lot of other lines of business. I mentioned a few of them. We also have operations outside the U.S. that comprise a large portion of our revenue. If we're really going to put our money where our mouth is, we have to do all of this stuff enterprise-wide throughout the world, and we are doing that. And I will tell you, we bit off a lot there to do all of this at once, but it's important that we not be viewed as doing this purely reactionary because the government came in and investigated this and we settled. This is something we're doing on our own initiative, much broader, including in the spine industry, where you have hundreds of small companies that aren't going to be playing by these same rules. And believe me, we hear it every day. that the competitors aren't playing by the same rules, and it's putting us at a competitive disadvantage. Our response to that is kind of that's their problem. You work with Zimmer, you're going to do it our way. This is our model. It's one program for our entire company. We also think it's important, as I mentioned before, there's two sides of these relationships. We want to take it on ourselves to make sure that the professionals that we consult with are well trained on these compliance and ethics issues, and even broader than that, things like off-label promotion. We're going to bring a lot of important issues into this training, but on an annual basis, we're going to require, as a condition to being a consultant with Zimmer, that you go through our training program. And that's been well received so far by people that we've talked to on the collaborator side. We also, this is a general point, but we want to make sure that people we work with, whether they're employees, salespeople, collaborators that are surgeons, all of these people share our vision, that they truly get it. They understand why we're doing what we're doing. And to the extent they don't, there's lots of other opportunities for those people to go somewhere else. And we've made some hard decisions in that regard, but it's important to us that we only work with people that truly understand our import that we're putting on these issues, and that they're going to not put us at risk by their own behavior. So that's something we're doing. And the last point I want to raise on what we're doing is really promoting this whole transparency initiative. That's a big reason why you all are here today talking. And we did have the opportunity to take part in this Physician Payment Sunshine Act hearing. We supported it then. We did make some recommendations as to how we think that could be improved, and those were listened to, and they've actually come out with a newer version draft of that I think addresses a lot of our concerns. So when we saw that, we gave another letter to Senators Cole and Grassley, and we totally support what they're doing. Some other companies have done the same, but I think that's a great development. We, in our deferred prosecution agreements, are kind of a guinea pig in this regard, because our deferred prosecution agreements require the 5 orthopedic companies to publicly disclose on our websites every surgeon or other healthcare professional consultant that we have a relationship with, and the dollar figure that they got paid in 2007, and then we update that every quarter. And I will tell you that's been a lightning rod of controversy, because it does not allow us the opportunity to even to say what those dollars are for. It's just a name, a city, and a dollar figure. So I applaud the Sunshine Act, because it actually does allow you to categorize things, so you can say these are monies paid for their IP contributions, or for training, or for meals, or whatever it is. So it's a good thing, and we think that people, as they understand that more, will appreciate the impact that has. I don't think patients are going to change their mind as far as what doctor they see because of he has a relationship with industry, or he's getting money from industry. I think sometimes patients would actually appreciate that their doctor was part of the development of their product or whatever, but I do think patients have a right to know, and other key stakeholders have a right to know, that those relationships exist and what truly is being exchanged in the way of dollars. So I think that's a great movement. Zimmer will continue to support anything along those lines. In concluding, I just want to say that this is hard. It's challenging, particularly if others don't follow our lead. People are going to come at these issues, and we're experiencing that at different speeds. I think we've had hypersensitivity to it because of some of the things that we've gone through in the last 9 months, but I think it's hard to refute the rationale for the things that we're doing, and I think people will gradually come along to it. But we think we're the market leader within our industry, hips and knees and broader orthopedics, and we think it's important that as a market leader, from a revenue standpoint, market share standpoint, that we also lead on these issues of compliance and ethics, and we've taken that responsibility on. And we pride ourselves on innovation, and this is just another form of innovation. We're being innovative in the way that we address conflicts of interest in our surgeon collaboration. And I already mentioned, we want to do this all at once. We don't want to baby step this and incrementalize it. It's the right thing to do for us. It's the right thing to do for our shareholders and our industry. Again, it's a great industry. We improve millions and millions of people's lives every year, and we ought to be proud of that. So to be put through the scrutiny we've been put through because of our own issues in the past is not the way to do it. So I want to close with this last point. And this is really a final remark that just says how we want to compete as a company. And it's just, our goal is to ensure that patients benefit from the innovations focused on their needs, and that everyone with a stake in quality health care can rest assured that physicians choose products based solely on what they believe is best for patients. That's the only basis upon which Zimmer wants to compete, and I think the other companies want to compete too. So, again, I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak with you, and look forward to answering questions later.
Thank you very much. I'd like now